Coming up on Theater Talk.
The lawyer who signed the papers for the board of the American Plays Theater that I had to sign said, you know, this takes a lunatic. Are you the lunatic? I said, yes, I'm the lunatic.
Theater Talk is made possible in part by the CUNY TV Foundation. I am so happy to be here today at the Wynn Handman studio with the great Wynn Handman, producer, director, and my former acting teacher. When you have taught, I have a list here of just a handful of all the people you've taught. Alec Baldwin, Kathleen Chalfant, Mia Farrow, Sandy Duncan, Richard Gere, Joel Grey, Burt Reynolds, Mercedes Ruehl, Anna Devere Smith, Joanne Woodward, Denzel Washington. What did you teach them?
Well, you were in class, you know. I taught them to work organically, work from the life that they create inside them, and let it flow into the acting. That's very basic, but that's what I teach. I bring things to life, and all of those actors have brought things to life very successfully.
So how do you get them to bring things to life?
Just basically, the first thing you have to do is stimulate the self-suggestion ability of the actor. If you're not self-suggestible, you should stay out of acting. Very sane people don't readily go with suggestion. Actors will immediately be gullible and believe in imaginary circumstances and want that to happen. And then it will come to life. And when they come to life, there's something going on that's interesting, that's valuable, that's colorful, that's amusing, that's moving. If they have that ability, then we start developing that in the acting class. But many of the people that come to me have already been acting and doing that, so I don't have to teach them. Like if you came back to class, Susan, you would be immediately available for it.
Do you have people as old as I am in your class?
I have older people.
Oh, really?
And also there are many other things. You have to live off the other person. You have to suggest the when to yourself. The given circumstances, you may remember, one of them is the when. Yeah, and acting comes from wanting what you want, and you have to want very badly.
You have to want very badly.
In most dramatic situations. However, there are exceptions with the more contemporary plays that grew out of Waiting for Godot, in which the opening lines are nothing to be done. And so there's no burning thing going on inside the belly of the character.
So then what are they drawing off of?
They're drawing on life and letting life happen to them, as Samuel Beckett in that play suggests to them.
Then once the suggestible actors are here in your class, and they're sitting here and the other students are watching them, they do the scene, and then what is it that you do to improve them?
You see, when I'm working with them, they're not bringing in a finished product. I put them through the creative process that finally can become a finished product. And so each class is usually a stage with each one of them in their creative process with what they're working on, which ranges anywhere from Shakespeare and the Greeks to the most contemporary plays. And also I use the Spoon River Anthology as a very good exercise. You remember it?
Oh, how could I forget?
Well, it's like a textbook for my class because you get a meal and a pill with those characters. They're so good. But to get back to what you're teaching people and what they're doing is they make things exist for themselves to the degree that when they talk about it, when they live it, you believe it. So that's a big part of the process.
Are actors born or are they made?
That's a very good question. Some are born, well, when they're young, they're doing very wonderful things as actors, and then they outgrow it.
For example, I knew your student, Richard Gere, very young man, and before he even came to your class, and I thought that I have never seen somebody who was such a basic, and may I say, no disrespect, Richard, if you're watching, self-absorbed talent. This person was obviously born an actor.
He has great feeling for acting, and he has gone through certain changes in his life, and he's no longer, as you described, he's very spiritual.
That's right.
And very giving.
Well, where are you going to go when you get older? You better get spiritual and giving.
Well, he is. And as a matter of fact, he was honored by the Museum of Moving Images.
Oh, really?
And I can't, I'm teaching nights, and usually I can't go to these, but I had a lot of pressure on me to go to this event. Richard says you must be there. Now, why was it necessary? Because in the religion he now follows, your predecessors, those who were there at your origins, those from whom you sprang, are the key people in your life. And he follows through with that.
Oh, that's wonderful.
So I was wondering, why is it so important for me to be here? Well, it was because most thing he talked about was my work with him in the acting class. But this is something funny. He was finally awarded given the award by Denzel Washington. So when he gave him the award, he says to the I studied with Wynn too.
That's right. A great point of pride.
So Richard was in class, you remember, he took a lot of, and he's on the cover of the book that recently came out.
That's right, Wynn Plays Show by Jeremy Gerard. We could talk about so many of your students. I mean, how many students have you had over the years? Thousands.
Thousands.
Yeah, but you started the American Place Theater in 1964? I have it right
well, it was incorporated in 1962. The first official production was The Old Glory by Robert Lowell, who at that point was considered America's greatest poet.
Yes.
And he was. And The Old Glory was, to me, one of the most, well, I used to think the most important play I ever did at the American Place Theater. It's in verse. It's based upon the writings of Herman Melville and Hawthorne. It was crazy. I mean, the original board, the lawyer who signed the papers for the board of the American Place Theater that I had to sign, said, you know, this takes a lunatic. Are you the lunatic? I said, yes, I'm the lunatic.
Now, why would it be? Because it was so complicated legally?
Well, because at that time, in 1962, not-for-profit was not a known thing.
Yes.
There was not a not-for-profit theater in New York, I don't think.
Really?
And it started with La Mama and American Place back at the 62 period. And she had never heard of not-for-profit. She had to look it up. And I said, I think this theater has to be not-for-profit because we're not doing plays for commercial reasons. We're doing plays that it would be a waste if the plays weren't done. It would be a waste if these writers were not heard from. But they'll never be on Broadway because they're not commercial enough. And so the truth is I started a theater which I only did what I felt was needed and would not be done commercially.
Someone said, who shall remain nameless, said that you wanted to make an alternative to Broadway because you hated Broadway.
On the contrary, I did not hate Broadway. I felt there should be an alternative. Right. And I will say, at that time, you see, we were coming out of the 50s, which were a rather dull period and not very exciting. And you were getting good plays, but I felt there were going to be other plays that are more innovative, more experimental, if you want to use the word, fresher. They're never going to get on Broadway. And it would be a waste if they weren't done. So I would say I did plays that were an alternative to Broadway. And you say, well, what were your influences? I can tell you I took the following influences. There was an article in the New York Times by a man named John Wharton, who was a famous theater lawyer and a Broadway producer, who wrote a column, or an article, said the plight of the serious play. Okay. And then there was the English Stage Company, formed by George Devine, an actor, a serious actor in England, in the 50s, which started doing plays that were written more about real people, working class people.
Yes.
It was a whole movement following World War II, and a wonderful playwright was part of that. John Osborne.
Of course, yes.
Look Back in Anger was an important play. Arnold Wesker, who came from East London, equivalent to the Lower East Side Jewish neighborhoods in New York. And he came to New York, and some of us were very interested in hearing from him. So there was a meeting in a Broadway theater after one of the shows for members of Actors' Equity who wished to attend, as a way of hearing from George Devine. And he said something which stayed with me. Where is the mind in the American theater? I hear a lot of noise, but where is the mind? Well, that hit me. And I was asking myself, what is needed in the theater? My teaching was very successful.
So you were already a teacher?
Oh, yeah. I started teaching with Sandy Meisner, started me off in 1951.
So you were pretty much just out of the Army
then? I started
then,
teaching, yeah. And another point here is, who were the popular plays and the good plays that were coming along? William Inge, Tennessee Williams. Who was getting to direct those plays? Kazan. Yes. I had nothing against Kazan. He was an excellent director. But I knew I wasn't going to get those plays.
Right.
And so I thought there should be an alternative.
You weren't really concerned with what the critics said?
No, not really. I'd rather they liked the play than they didn't. And it would stimulate subscribers. But you have to realize, for 13 years, you couldn't buy a ticket. You'd have to subscribe. And the subscription was very, very inexpensive. But
and was that your idea?
That was, well, it was my idea combined with a man named McNeil Lowry, who was giving a lot of the Ford Foundation money out, and he wanted purity, and I had plenty of purity to give. But to the degree that when the Old Glory opened, it got some wonderful notices, and I wanted subscribers because I'm dealing with subscription only. So we took an ad in the New York Times with the critics' quotes saying, if you join the theater, you can see this play. I got a call from Mac Lowry. He said, what is this, Wynn? You're being commercial, you're advertising in the Times. I said, I'm only doing it to get subscribers. That's what you wanted. Your big phrase was subscribe now. He said, use that. Well, so he understood.
Oh, well, that's good.
I did. It took me 13 years, but then I guess I got convinced I had to have a box office. It began to be like, what is this, a private club? Why should we review the play? There was some article in The Voice about that. And it was my press agent. It may have been my press agent at that time, and I gave him his first job as a press agent.
Who was that?
Jeff Richards. Said, you cannot continue this way. So then from then I had a box office.
You had to become
but I didn't choose the plays because I think they would be box office.
Right. Do you think that ultimately, I mean, your theater eventually, you had to give it up. You built a beautiful theater, the American Place Theater.
The American Place Theater?
Yeah, you built a beautiful.
After 50 years, I gave it up. Right.
But did you feel you had been too pure and that the more commercial forces sort of gobbled you up and forced you out?
I could see that times changed. You see, what happened was, and I have no regrets, because I don't want to do plays because I think they can be popular.
Right.
I have a narrow vision that way, and I have to live with myself with it. But what happened was, the theaters that did plays that got hits and, just to me, middle-brow plays, they could have little black boxes, and they got popular. Their subscribers mounted because they had done these popular plays.
They had big box office shows to bring in the income.
And funding people say, hey, they get hits. Well, the American Place Theater is not getting hits.
You're just doing that art alone.
So then they could do get the play. And the agents then started saying, well, this is a popular theater, give them the play. So I had a hit in a wonderful play, which I did in 1965, a year after The Old Glory, Hogan's Goat.
You discovered Faye Dunaway.
I discovered Faye Dunaway, yes, and Faye Dunaway, she came in audition. I thought she was a good actress and beautiful, and for the lead in Hogan's Goat. And the director said, well, she'll do it in the movies. I said, no, we're going to give her a call back. She's a good actress. He was prejudiced against her because she was that beautiful.
Another one of your discoveries was Dustin Hoffman.
Yes, he was in the second play we did.
Right.
Harry Noonan Knight.
Now, was that an actor you could spot?
Well, I had spotted him because he was around. You see, when I took St. Clement's Church was a moribund church.
Yes.
Sidney Lanier and I met socially, and I would be talking about this theater that I'm dreaming about, called the American Place Theater, which had no building or anything, but it was what I wanted to do. He was a very theatrical Episcopal priest who loved theater. So when I had this idea for the theater, he loved it, and we got St. Clement's Church. Now, one of the things we did, and I loved doing it, was as part of the Sunday Mass, and that's what he wanted, we included theater. All kinds of things, theater. And so Dustin was a young actor around, and so I had a little company. And he did other things. Philip Roth was a Rockefeller grant at my theater, wrote a play called A Nice Jewish Boy. Dustin was the lead in that, but we just did it as a reading, and then Dustin said, I can't do beyond it. He wasn't the most secure actor around town. But anyway, he auditioned for Harry Noonan Knight, a play I only did plays I was pretty wild about.
Right.
Harry Noonan Knight's a genius play. And so Dustin got the part. And I had a student who I thought would be very good as Harry. There were Harry and Harry Noonan. That was Joel Grey. So the second play of the American Place Theater was Harry Noonan Knight with Joel Grey and Dustin Hoffman. And Dustin was brilliant in it. I will say, and if you see Dustin, he'll say, Wynn Handman, he tried to fire me. Yes, because at the first preview, the audience didn't hear you and didn't see your face.
So you said, I'm going to fire you?
I'm looking for another actor. I have people coming in. They want to see. That was a Friday night. The second night, Saturday night, I saw one of the most brilliant performances of my life. I'm just weeping to think of how great it was.
So he heard you.
He didn't. He just went. When Dustin was ready, he would do it.
Oh, I see.
I went through the same thing in The Journey of the Fifth Horse, another wonderful play, which Michael Tolan was in, and which he was.
And Dustin.
Same thing.
Yeah.
You really want stories. There were two leads, Dustin and another role, The Diary of a Superfluous Man, a short novel by Turgenev, was the basis that Ronald Ribman, the author, drew upon.
For Journey of the Fifth Horse.
For Journey of the Fifth Horse.
It was about a clerk, right?
Yeah, right. The clerk, he made up the clerk. Yeah, well, the other man had written a diary. That was played by Rip Torn. Well, Rip Torn and Dustin in the same production at that time just was not going to happen.
But now, why is that? The egos were too big?
Yeah. Rip left the cast. Michael Tolan replaced him, and he was excellent. Every play I did in the first 4 or 5 years won the Obie for Best Play.
Right.
The Old Glory, Harry Noonan Knight, Boy on the Straight Back Chair by Ron Tavel, which was wonderful. I think that won.
And then I'm going to fast forward
Yeah.
in time just because they want us to fast forward in time because it's television. But then you launched John Leguizamo, you launched Anna Devere Smith.
Eric Bogosian.
Eric Bogosian, Aasif Mandvi,
Yeah.
in these monologue plays that you
Well,
nursed
as
for
an
them.
acting teacher, I'm very good at with working with actors. It's solo. I can get performances out of them. And along came these talented people. These solo people that you singled from, that I worked with, are brilliant people.
And they're writers.
And
I mean,
they're
they were
writers.
devoted also to writing their own voices.
Right. You see, there's an interesting thing there. I saw Bogosian because Michael Feingold, the critic for The Voice, said, go see Wynn Handman, because he was doing nothing, Bogosian. So when Bogosian came to my office, and I had binders around the office of every production. So before he said anything to me, he put his hand on a binder, and it was like he was in some religious shrine. He said, that's what got me to do monologues. I said, well, it was Killer's Head, a monologue written by Sam Shepard that I did with a play called Action by Sam Shepard. And he said, well, you know, I was an actor wandering around not doing, and I saw Killer's Head, and I said, I could write monologues. And who was in Killer's Head? Richard Gere.
Ah.
For which I was attacked, the critic for the Daily News, with the double bill of Action and Killer's Head. He led his review off with the theater was underground. Fill that hole up with ashes and forget about it. That's how vicious he was. So that became Bogosian, and then John Leguizamo was influenced by Bogosian. He had seen him. So he started writing his own monologues, which were different than Bogosian's, because each one of his, it was like a whole costume and everything, where Bogosian would just pull up the sleeve and he's another character. But he started bringing them in, and it became a hit show at the American Place Theater, Mambo Mouth. Then I had for a long time in class Aasif Mandvi. He was brilliant, but he was just doing all the scenes. So he started bringing in a character, a waiter, in a restaurant on East 4th Street, or whatever one of those streets are, where there are Indian restaurants. And I encouraged him to bring in other characters. Well, before you know it, he was doing father, who owned the restaurant, the wife. He did the wife, the mother. He did the teenage daughter, and he was wonderful. I had Hold Me, which who knew? I didn't know it would be a big hit. We franchised it, and that was made from Pfeiffer's cartoons. and who was in that? My student, Kathleen Chalfant. That was her first acting out of my
and she's
studio,
brilliant.
Right?
Yeah.
And Paul Dooley was in Altman. Robert Altman saw Paul Dooley and used him in a lot of movies. And then there was a playwright I was doing, Steve Tessich. I did 7 of his plays, and hooked him up with a director, P.D. Yates, doing a play, and then they did a movie together, which won the Academy Award.
Breaking Away.
Breaking Away, right, came out of that. So a lot of consequences came out of what I did at the American Place
And I hope
Theater.
that you have full appreciation of that in your heart and soul.
I appreciate it because I feel that the work I did at the American Place Theater was very meaningful and resonates in so many ways. And I achieved what I wanted with actors. Actors would invariably say, when I'm working here, I'm reminded of why I got into the theater in the first place. You know, that meant a lot to me.
Do you have any suggestions for young actors? Any kind of facile tip of what young actors should remember?
Thoughts for young actors? Sean O'Casey said, I wouldn't want my daughter to be an actress. It's a cruel profession. And I'll say that. I have 2 daughters. They never wanted it. Everyone was, your daughters don't want it? No. So saying all that, I can tell you that when I wanted to get married, and the man was really supposed to support the wife, one of the friends of my wife's family, who was a PR guy, called me in and tried to dissuade me to quit it. You won't get any place. Get out of this profession.
Theater. Were you an actor then?
Yeah. Now, I did not quit the theater. I found a way. So I cannot say quit. It's a cruel profession. If it's in you, then you have to stay with it. And, well, it's what others say as well as I. If there's anything else you can do, do it. But if not, this is your life.
I'm so happy to be here with you. Why do you still teach?
I love teaching. I'm exhilarated by teaching. So when you ask me, am I going to teach the next class? I'm going to teach the next class at 7:15 tonight, and I'm looking forward to it. I have great joy from my students. I have as good theater happening in my studio as I'm going to find, and that helps me keep me going.
Our thanks to the Friends of Theater Talk for their significant contribution to this production. Theater Talk is made possible in part by the Frederick Lowe Foundation, the Corey and Bob Donnelly Charitable Fund, the Noel Coward Foundation, Carrie J. Fries, the Dorothy Strelson Foundation, plus public funds from the New York City Department of Cultural Affairs and the New York State Council on the Arts, a state agency.
We welcome your questions or comments for Theater Talk. Thank you and good night.